Welcome back to IAEE TV, sponsored by our friends at TMS for CNTV. I am Bob Fryer, and we got our friend Dan Sherman from TMS.
Bob, good to see you.
Executive VP of Business Development
Yes,
there
sir.
at TMS.
Yes, sir.
I have talked more about transportation in the last few days.
You're welcome.
You're very,
no
very
one
welcome.
ever talks
Thank you.
transportation, which
You
is
know,
why
and-
we're excited to do this.
And that's crazy talk, because when you're putting an event together, it's the first impression for an attendee and it's the last impression.
Correct.
They don't talk about, you ask somebody how their elevator ride went.
Right.
Nobody's going to say, oh, it's loud, it's like, I got to the right floor.
Right.
Same thing with transportation, and yet the importance of transportation can't be understated for an event, correct?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, organizers now are thinking about that attendee journey.
Yeah.
They're thinking about that attendee experience. They're mapping all this out. And we are that first touch point, typically for most of our customers. So we take that responsibility seriously. So we have to create citywide shuttle programs, one-way large mass move transfers. We have to create these knowing that it's the first and last impression, and that we are an extension of our customer based on their program, their goals, the host destination, that entire event experience. We take that very seriously.
You've used this expression a few times in the last few years, event mobility.
Right.
Correct?
Yes.
Event mobility.
Yes.
Explain to me what you mean by that.
Right. Well, I would say holistically in the US, mobility isn't really associated with event transportation.
No, it's
transportation
you're
infrastructure.
Are you saying you're thinking about wheelchairs and things like that? That kind of mobility?
Typically, that's
Yeah.
what people default to.
Yeah.
I would say outside of the United States, it is the term for transportation. Lots of different kind of modules about how people think about that. But with respect to events, we are launching a series of tools and kind of thought leadership based initiatives that really help bring event mobility solutions, ideas to life for event organizers, our host destination partners, and our industry as a whole. We'll be working with IAEE and other kind of industry associations to start educating folks about what event mobility is. And I'll give you a short snapshot about what I define that as. Event mobility to an event could be using transportation or not from a private transportation shuttle management
Because not
provider.
every event uses transportation.
I would say honestly, Bob,
Yeah.
only about 20% of events use some form of private transportation, believe it or not. Not every event is a citywide. Most are self-contained events.
At a hotel,
A couple
go to the
hundred
conference
people,
room.
right, exactly. So event transportation by definition is not a widely used service necessarily. For all the large events that people know and love in Vegas, Orlando, San Francisco, all these cities, those citywide events do need a large form and plan for shuttle transportation to get folks to and from. But back to my definition of event mobility. Event mobility is literally defined as all that host destination transportation infrastructure that is available to that event organizer on behalf of their attendees, being able to document what that is and how they can leverage that transportation mode, right? It could be the rail to and from the airport. It could be the rideshare component in a city. It could be the Tesla loop in Las Vegas. It could be the monorail. It could be transit buses that running that route every day. How that ties into sustainability, how it ties into private transportation, being able to package all your event mobility options into one plan, into one dashboard, into one area that allows organizers to really plan accordingly for that. Because at the end of the day, if they can control that narrative and give people the right information at the right time, whether they're doing private transport or not, they can really own that attendee experience and attendee journey in their terms. What
is your biggest factor when you're going into trying to plan for like a big event like Expo? Do you look at where the people are staying in the hotels? Okay, the JW is right next door, so we're not going to have any transportation there.
Sure.
But there are some further out. LA, you're not doing a lot of walking here. So what is your biggest factor when you start to plan for a show?
Well, I would say it's based on your room block. So take any event, we based on your room block and number of hotels, right? Yeah. You can actually get away without doing transportation for a large event if there's an anchor hotel. And a lot of these large cities have an anchor hotel. You can do a room block of 500, 800, even 1,200 maybe on peak. And you don't need any form of transportation. But if you're a group of 10,000 on peak, 15,000 on peak, 30,000 people on peak, that is when you really need a large citywide event transportation shuttle system.
What do you mean when you say sustainability? How does transportation and sustainability, how does that come together?
Well, just like any other kind of supplier that event organizers use, there are certain KPIs that we can track and report against.
Yeah.
There's lots of different industry kind of sustainability reporting frameworks right now that we adhere to. In fact, back in my day before TMS, I launched one of the first sustainability consultancies, Legacy, for event organizers, host venues, and hotels. And that was before people could even spell sustainability back then. They're just, what's that, green stuff? They didn't really understand. Right. At the end of the day, sustainability is all about that economic impact, that environmental impact, and that social impact. So it's not just how much diesel are we burning, it is, are we using local providers? Are we reinvesting your dollars, your show dollars back in that community?
There you go.
What is that overall impact? So we're tracking many different KPIs with respect to the service that we provide. And we have really savvy organizers that require a lot of information for us because they're doing that annual sustainability report and they're tracking and comparing against their progress year after year. And if we have organizers that know and trust that we're doing the right thing, we've been doing carbon offsets for 15 years, and that's becoming more popular, just to offset your entire shuttle transportation program. So there's many things we can do. It just depends on how they're tracking it right now and what framework, industry framework they're using in order to document that.
Talk to me about this. You guys are celebrating 30 years.
Right. Yep.
30 years this year. And it's not a rebrand, but if you're going to your website, you're going to notice some changes. What are some of the things that you guys are
We're calling
doing?
it a brand refresh.
Brand refresh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not much has changed with the logo necessarily.
Okay.
But I would say, when you think about a brand, it's not about a logo. It's about, the feeling you get when you see that brand in life, right? And I think from a TMS perspective, we've been in business for 30 years coming up here in January. Our first show was in 1995 with Comdex. And now we're doing some of the largest trade shows in North America, largest sporting events in the world. And we've really grown into a company that is an extension of our customers.
Yeah.
You heard Tom say earlier with SEMA is that at the end of the day, he needs to work with partners. It's not just us, it's many of the other GCs and AV providers. That is a really extension of their team. So we have, decades relationships with a lot of our customers because we understand that attendee, their persona. And when you think about 2025, we touched on event mobility and us kind of bringing some new thought leadership and ideas to the industry and technology solutions. It's really just the start. We've really just scratched the surface of what event transportation, event mobility as a whole, how it really affects our events and how we can enhance that.
I think a lot of people know TMS from, if you're in this industry, you know about TMS from doing the transportation. But you guys, like in an emergency situation, you're there as well for that too.
Yes, you're right. Yeah, we do a lot of the hurricane evacuation work for FEMA and some of the planning for the states. Every storm is different, every emergency is different, but we are at the beck and call for many of the states and federal agencies for emergency. We've done over 21 hurricane deployments in the last decade and a half, and many more individual kind of emergency-based contracts.
The planning obviously is more impromptu for that, but are there similarities between planning for an event and planning for something like that?
I would say, one, you need an incredibly robust supplier network, right? So TMS is the largest procurer of motor coaches in the United States by definition. So we have a partner network of over 1,500 operators throughout the United States and Canada. And why that's important is because for traditional shows, we need to be able to drive value for our customers and leverage all that buying power to help, provide that service at the best cost possible for the best value. And on the emergency side of things, we need to be able to get in touch with vendors at a moment's notice to deploy within the hour or hours. Right. So that network, those relationships that are built over 30 years and more, the leaders of our company have been in this industry their whole life.
Yeah.
My grandfather actually started a bus company back in '65 in DC. I grew up in this business as well. So I literally say I have diesel in my blood, but it's just about being part of this marketplace, the motor coach, transportation, and transportation, when you think of Uber, when you think of all these innovations happening with autonomous vehicles, very, very exciting marketplace to be in right now.
Yeah.
And we're trying to figure out ways to adopt that into the event side over the next 3, 5, or 10 years.
That does bring up the question, though, if we're an autonomous taxi, do you tip? I don't know. I don't think you would you?
I think you got to tip everywhere nowadays.
You got to tip everywhere.
Right.
Yeah, all right. Dan, good to talk to you, my friend. And by the way, thank you again for the sponsorship here.
Always a pleasure. We appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely. For IAEE TV, sponsored by TMS, I'm Bob Fryer with CNTV.